to the very first episode of Robert Ross's Comedy Greats. Robert.
Hello, Chubb. That's my line. Just picking my line. Yes, here we go. So this is the first of a new series. It's very exciting. We did an audio podcast, Comedy Heroes, and this is going to be a longer show. Obviously, you can see us as well. Yes. So who's the first great we're going to celebrate?
We are starting with a lady. One of the ladies of Carry On, Miss Joan Sims.
Yeah, dear Joan Sims, what a treat. So I'm in your hands, darling. Over to you. What do you want to know about Joni?
Joni, as you call her, Joni. So let's talk with her name first, because I know that wasn't her full name, was it?
She was born Irene Joan Marion Sims in 1930, so she would have been 90 this year. And yeah, she was sort of starstruck and stage struck at a very early age. Really, she loved show business, and her father was the station master at Leyden, the train station, Leyden in Essex. Joni would entertain the train passengers with impersonations of her favourite film stars, like sort of Gracie Fields and Judy Garland and Ginger Rogers, who'd be singing and dancing down the platform. So she loved showing off in front of the passengers, really.
So how then did that lead into her acting career?
She was determined to become an actor, and so she went to RADA. The fourth attempt, she failed a few auditions, but was dogged and determined to get into the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, in case you don't know what RADA is. And she was there, and she was a brilliant student, and she loved it. And then, as often happened in the sort of the end of the 1940s into the early 50s, she was an ASM and assistant stage manager, and did a lot of theatre work in rep companies. That was the sort of the lifeblood of British theatre, really, post-war. Every actor worth their salt started in repertory companies. So you were playing sort of small parts, big parts. You know, you were rehearsing one play, learning another play, and playing a third play all in the same week. So it was a quick turnaround. So you learnt fast, and she just became a brilliant sort of character actor. She played everything. You know, she was so good.
So is that why she went down the comedy route, do you think?
I think she preferred doing comedy. I think her Carry On co-star Kenneth Connor always said, when I'm doing comedy, I yearn to do dramatic work, and when I'm doing drama, I yearn to do comedy. So I think, but she showed a great talent for comedy, and she did a lot of comedies on stage. So yeah, and she actually broke into films very early on. I mean, she was only in her early 20s when she made her first feature film.
Which was?
Well, she did a film called Will Any Gentleman ... which is a George Cole comedy, beloved by Doctor Who fans now, because William Hartnell and John Pertwee were in it way before Doctor Who, and it's a great cast. Peter Butler's in it, and Sid James is in it, as always. Those 1950s British films. So she's in that, and she did lots of other little films. She did a TV series called Colonel March Investigates, which was a Boris Karloff sort of crime anthology series, and she was in that. And they cobbled together some episodes for a film version, and she was in that as well. So she did a handful of films in the early 50s, and then the parts got bigger and bigger.
So a film I know we watched very recently, she was in St Trinian's.
She was, that's an early one, yes, the very first St Trinian's, the
Bells. She's got this lovely long blonde hair.
Looking gorgeous, like sort of Veronica Lake. She looks like a sort of 1940s Hollywood film star. She looks great in that. She loved doing that, yeah. She loved playing glamorous parts. I think because, and she won't mind me saying it, because her weight did fluctuate quite a lot. So she ended up sort of playing sort of character parts more than the glamour puss parts. But she loved playing that character, one of the teachers in the Bells and Trinians. But again, that same year, she was in the very first Doctor film, Doctor in the House, playing a character called Rigor Mortis, who sort of goes on a nightmare date with Dr. Bogard. Always she's stuffing herself with bananas, I think, or she's eating something anyway. I've not seen it for years. So she plays a sort of the grotesque character in that. So she should juggle both sort of glamorous and sort of ogress characters. You know.
So very diverse, really,
totally,
in her performance. Yeah. So interesting that you said that her first film, she was with Sid James, who often then became her on-screen husband or boyfriend. Or...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they worked together really well. They did another film called Dry Rot, which was a stage farce, as a film. Ronald Shiner and Brian Ricks, before he did all his own stage farces and TV farces, and she worked with Brian Ricks a lot on telly. But they did a film, Sid James and Joan Sims did a film together called Dry Rot, which is about horse racing, which, as you know, it's a film about horse racing made in the 1950s in this country. Sid James is in it, pretty much. And Joan's great in that, and she got on really well with Sid. And there was a story she told me that happened that there was an issue with an actor called Michael Shepley, an old character actor, that kept on fluffing his lines all the time, and the director brought the production to a halt and bawled this actor out, who was an elderly actor, and was in tears and really emotional about it. And Sid James said, "Well, stop, until you apologise to that actor, I will not go on." And he stormed off. And Joan Sims said, "Oh, I like him. he's going to stand up for people," and they became really, really friendly. So yeah, so they loved making the Carry Ons together. That was just a dream team, really. When you look at them we're ploughing through the Carry Ons during this lockdown. We've just hit Carry On Loving, so they're sort of they're star-crossed lovers now, aren't they? Really, in that one, she's beautiful. Actually, she's very glamorous in that, and she's the object of Sid's thwarted desires under the watchful eye of Hattie Jakes, of course.
Well, before we get to Carry On, did she do a lot of stage?
She did a lot of stage work. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew her quite well, and I had a big collection of her stage programs, theatre programs, and I remember getting her lots on eBay for gifts for birthdays and things, which she didn't have. But yeah, she loved doing stage, but she preferred film, really. That was her sort of medium. But yeah, she did lots of theatre work, actually. And as I say, she was in rep companies and went into the West End and did lots of reviews and comedy shows. She did a thing called The Bells of St Martin's, which was a West End comedy with Hattie Jakes, well before Carry On, and Douglas Byng, who was he's one of my forgotten heroes of comedy, Douglas Byng. He was a great sort of female impersonator, but he wore a dress in that as well. But so she's in that. But yeah, so she did lots of theatre work, and she carried on doing theatre work until into the 80s. She was doing pantomime and that sort of stuff. But yeah, she enjoyed it, but she liked the sort of the more sedate, take two, take three of making films. Although there weren't many takes on the Carry Ons, of course. But
well, let's go into the Carry On. So, what was her first Carry On?
Carry On Nurse, where she plays Nurse Stella Dawson. So she missed the very first one. And her part, I suppose, in the first one is a sort of Dora Bryan plays the sort of the embryonic Joan Sims character. And there was a lot of, back in the 50s, it's sometimes hard to remember now, hard to imagine, but Joan Sims and Dora Bryan were mistaken for each other quite a lot. They looked quite similar. They're sort of lovely cherubic little faces. So she came in for number 2, Carry On Nurse. And then she was in almost all of them. I mean, I can run through them if you want me to, but I'll do that. It's a part of who gave. We'll talk about them in detail. But she did Carry On Nurse and then Teacher, Constable and Regardless on the bounce. Then she missed 4, and then she came back for Cleo and did the lot then. So Cleo, I'll go through them. Cleo Cowboy, Screaming, Don't Lose Your Head, Follow That Camel, Doctor, Up the Khyber, Camping, Again Doctor, Up the Jungle, Loving, Henry, At Your Convenience, Matron Abroad, Girls, Dick, Behind, England, Clips in That's Carry On, and Emmanuel. There you go.
So try saying that in your sleep, folks, or backwards. Can you do it backwards?
I'm not going to. I'll do it backwards on the outtakes. But
so she really was. I mean, was
24,
was she in it the most?
Kenneth Williams did 26, so okay. Kenneth has the record. Although Joni has the record as the person in the most. I think she's in the most Carry-Ons, including the TV shows as well. She did lots of TV episodes. There was a series in 1975 called Carry On Laughing, where she did loads of those sort of self-contained half hours.
So she must have had a real love for the Carry-Ons then.
Yeah, and they had a love for her. I mean, obviously Peter Rogers, the producer and creator of the Carry-Ons, was also married to Betty Box, who produced the Doctor films. So Betty always was quite proud that she discovered Joni first, because she was in Doctor in the House, of course, well before the Carry-Ons even started. So I think we worked it out. I think I sat down with Joni once. I think she did like 50-something films for the two of them over the course of 25 years. So, but they knew. I mean, all of them were great. But I think for my money, Joan was probably the most versatile actor in the Carry-Ons, and she could do anything, and she was brilliant, and she could just bowl up and do it, and she was funny, and she was poignant, and she could be glamorous and sassy, and she could be sort of, you know, nagging and repulsive and everything in between, really. So she was just brilliant, and a lovely person as well. So it's just, you know,
It's funny.
She was loved by all the crew and the co-stars. I mean, she was just turned up on time, did the job, and was nice. That's all you want to be as an actor.
Well, I think any job, isn't it?
Yeah, any job.
It's funny you mentioned about her being glamorous, because I believe one of her favourite carry-ons, and I think for a lot of them actually, was Carry On Cowboy.
Yeah, you know your stuff, don't you? Yeah, absolutely with me. Yeah, it's absolutely her favourite carry-on. Yeah, and also Sid James's favourite carry-on, and Jim Dale's, I think, as far as I know. Yeah, Jim loves doing that, or loved doing that. And Joan's so good, and she's Belle, and she's just beautiful, and you know, she loved that dress, and she was quite trim then. She, as I say, she did fluctuate, but she was quite trim in for Carry On Cowboy in 1965. So she was only 35 when she shot that. That dress she wears is so Mae West, and it's so figure hugging, and she looks beautiful, and her hair's great, you know, sort of beehive cut, and she's, you know, pistol packing mama sort of thing, and coming down those stairs. She just looks amazing. Yeah, so she loved that. Yeah. And
of course, another on-screen partner she had in a couple of films is, of course, the great Leslie Phillips.
Ding dong.
Ding dong.
Leslie, yeah, they work together so well. Yeah, well, Carry On Teacher particularly, they're good, aren't they? You know, so. Leslie was like, because the censor had problems because her name in that is Miss Alcock. Right?
Yeah.
And he had to sort of, Gerald Thomas, the director, was trying to say, you've got to flatten that cock, if you'll pardon the expression, because the way Leslie says it, Miss Alcock. It sounded disgusting, which is supposed to be, of course. It's a Norman Hoodis script. It's full of off-colour jokes, but yeah. So they're just a great team. And of course, she worked with Leslie a lot on the Doctor films too.
Yeah.
So we've been ploughing through the Leslie Phillips Doctor films, of which there were 3, and Joan's in all 3 of the ones with Leslie. So.
And now she played a matron, didn't she?
She did in Doctor in Clover. Yeah.
I think you told me that there's a connection to. Were they looking at using her to be matron?
Yeah, well, I'll make it short, because, you know, you've got to buy the books, folks. It's all in the books. But yeah, as I say, Gerald Thomas, director of the Carry-Ons, his brother was Rafe Thomas, who directed all the Doctor films, who was Betty Box's director, really. Betty Box produced all the Doctor comedies, and Peter Rogers was married to Betty Box. So the 4 of them sort of owned pretty much Pinewood Studios comedy films in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So by the time I made Doctor in Clover in 1966, Hattie Jakes hadn't done a carry-on for 3 or 4 years. She hadn't made one since Carry On Cabby. So when Peter Rogers started planning Carry On Doctor, which at one point was going to be the last one, and they were going to sort of knock it on the head and do like a homage to the Doctor comedies and say this is the last Carry On. Joan Sims was the first choice to play matron, because she just played matron in Doctor in Clover. We sort of saw them actually pretty much close to each other. This lockdown, we've been watching a lot of comedies, a lot of musicals, and I think we watched Doctor in Clover and Carry On Doctor pretty much close to each other. So originally she was going to get the part of matron to connect the 2 series, so, you know, forcefully. And then I think it was Charlie Rothwell said, well, Hattie Jakes is matron, you know, having not played it, you know, since Carry On Nurse, nearly 10 years earlier. But so they approached Hattie, and Hattie said yes, and then they recast Joan and let Joan have Chloe Gibson, Frankie Howard's assistant. So, which
again is a very dour kind of character.
Yeah.
So different.
Yeah. I mean, again, she was only in her mid-30s when she did that. So, and her and Frankie Howard was another match made in comedy heaven. They made each other laugh so much that they did a lot of TV together as well, and of course 2 Carry On films together. So there's lots of sort of, we wish we can find the outtakes, and lots of corpsing going on, particularly doing Up the Jungle, which we watched again quite recently, with the whole sort of windscreen viper stuff and all that. You know, because you can see Joan's lips sort of going a bit because she's about to crack up. But she did that a lot. She did that as the lovely scene in Don't Lose Your Head with Charles Hawtrey, when she sat in the arbour with Charlie Hawtrey, and, you know, her brother is Kenneth Williams. You know, my brother, the Count. And she sort of, and she's just about laughing on it, and Charlie's laughing too. So the joy of those films, all those comedy films of the immediate post-war year, there's a real sort of carnivalesque happiness about them that just is retained in the eyes of the performers. I think it comes across.
Did she have a close kind of female friend with any of the Carry On stars?
Hattie Jacques was sort of mother hen to all of them, so yeah. So and Joan, again, I'm not going to go into her personal life because I mean she had fairly frequent sort of romantic problems and whatever. So she would often go to Hattie, and who would sort of comfort her. And Peter Rogers was a really close friend. I know he's not a female, but just talking about sort of when there were issues on the set. I remember Peter Rogers. I think Joan told me this. Joan was one, heartbreak particularly affected her quite badly, and she was sat just outside the studio gates at Pinewood Studios, and Peter Rogers saw her crying and went over and put 20 quid into her hand and said, buy yourself a bottle of perfume, cheer yourself up, sort of thing. So she had friends there, but Hattie Jacques was the one that really looked after her, And Liz Fraser, they were close friends too. They're both strippers in Doctor in Love. in like the Carry On, she plays different characters throughout the Doctor shows, Doctor films rather. So she's a stripper. Her and Liz are these great sort of good time girls in Doctor in Love, which is just brilliant. So
did she have an all-time favourite role she did? Do you know?
She loved doing a thing called Lady Killers, which is a TV show, 1980, produced by Peter Rogers, not the Carry On Peter Rogers, Peter Rogers, and she just shows what a brilliant actor she is, what a serious actor she is. She plays a murderess called Amelia Dyer, and she had sort of baby farms, so she would sort of take unwanted babies and either kill them or and get money for them. And it was an anthology series called Lady Killers. The first series is better. The second series is all about people who killed ladies or women, and the first series is about murderesses. And she's in this, and it's so touching. I'm getting quite goosebumpy now. It's all based around the actual court case, but she's in her prison cell, sort of talking, and she's slightly sort of not with it. She's mentally deficient, and she shouldn't have been. Spoilers here, folks, but she doesn't get away with it. Basically, none of them do. But she shouldn't have really been arrested because she was not really mentally sound. But Joan is just, so she loved doing that. She loved that part.
So it's quite a straightforward thing.
She loved it. I think because by that point, she'd done 25 years of comedy films and was known as the Carry On lady. So to get something really meaty like that offered to you was quite a rarity for any of them. So she loved that. But she loved getting laughs. I mean, she loved getting laughs. I mean, it's just.
And of course, I remember her in the 80s in Simon and the Witch.
Simon and the Witch, of course, absolutely. She played lots of sort of landed gentry people. She was in Wurzel Gummidge as well around that same sort of time, and she's great in Simon and the Witch. Yeah, but I mean, again, a lot of them did children's shows. She's done another thing called Lord Tramp with Hugh Lloyd, probably a little bit before that, sort of late 70s, a bit before your time. But she played lots of those sort of stately ladies, and she was very grand looking. She could do that, but she was a sweetheart really. But she was very grand on screen. So yeah, she loved doing that.
So how did you then come to meet her?
Let me think. So we were doing a documentary for ITV in 1998. So I knew her for about three or 4 years, about 3 years. And it was called What's a Carry On? So that was 40 years of the Carry Ons. And she turned down interviews for ages, and she hadn't done anything about her Carry Ons at all, as far as I know. Certainly not after having made them. I mean, the 20 years since Emmanuel had been made. So we asked her. We got in touch with her agent, and she said yes. Amazingly, I mean, Peter Rogers was chuffed to bits, and Audrey Skinner, his late PA, personal assistant, and they made this banner with "Welcome Home, Joan," because we shot it at Pinewood Studios. So we got her this car, and she swept up, and Peter Rogers had put this red carpet out, and it was a real big deal, and she was just terrific and lovely. And I think we were just having lunch or after we shot the interview, and she said, "Oh, I'm thinking about doing my autobiography." Or maybe I suggested it. I said, "Oh, you should." "No, I don't want to do that." She said, "I don't do it." I said, "Well, you really should. I help you write it." And that was it. And we got together, and we got on really well. And I was around her place in Knightsbridge a lot for the next sort of 2 years or so. So lots of Diet Coke and cherry cake. That was my memory of that. But,
And is that her favourite? Yeah.
well, she liked to tipple, so she wasn't drinking, so she was on Diet Coke, and she would like sort of cherry cake and loved Chinese takeaways. That was the other thing I remember as well. Lots of Chinese takeaways.
Was she, do you think, ever aware that she was the first or one of the very few women in comedy? You know.
Oh, there was lots before her, but I think it's become a sort of cliche now that there weren't many post-war. There were quite a lot post-war, but I think the thing she was humble about, and which I sort of, not explained it to her, I'm not, she's not an idiot, but I mean to sort of like put it into context for her, that she was playing strong characters. Well, and some of them were battle axes, and you look at stuff like Carry On Girls or something, or even Doctor in the House. They're slightly misogynistic maybe, but she played really strong characters. I mean, Carry On Loving, she's very strong in that. Carry On Regardless, she's very strong. Doctor in Love, she's very strong in that. She plays we've not got to Doctor in Trouble yet, which is, I will say, the latest one, not the last, the latest Doctor comedy film, where she plays this Russian sea captain, and it's just you think, who would cast Joan Sims as that? But she plays it really well. So I think she was quite proud of her position as a strong female actor in comedy for many, many years, and respected as well. My gosh, when she did the later sitcoms like On the Up, just the one Mrs. Wembley, which became a catchphrase for her in the early 90s. I mean, she was a proper doyen of acting to go along. And as time goes by, the Jeffrey Palmer, Judi Dench, she's in that as well. About 9 or 10 of those. So,
and a great mimic as well, because Zig Zig.
Zig Zig. She who handed out on the platter and all that, and Follow That Camel. Yeah, I mean, but she could play anything. I mean, I've never seen her give a bad performance. There's only a handful of actors that I can think of that I can actually sit and watch in anything, and I think Joan Sims is one of those. She's just always good, and I think I've probably seen everything of hers that survives. She's great. I mean, talking about sitcoms, she plays Gran in the Alf Garnett shows, To Death Us Do Part. Now she's playing Gran. I mean, this is early 70s, so she's 40, just turned 40. She's playing this like right out of the cartoons of Giles. She's in this sort of like big heavy coat and the granny glasses, and she's brilliant. You think that can't be Joan Sims, and it is. And there's scenes with Bora Mitchell as Alf that are just hilarious. And Danny Nichols, she's Danny Nichols' mum. So she's great in that, and she's in the film version, the Alf Garnett saga as well as Gran. And around the same time, she was in Sykes quite a lot with Eric Sykes and Hattie Jakes, of course, and playing Marge, who was sort of Eric's on-off girlfriend. You look at her career in order and in context, and you think, my gosh, she did like sort of 10 really different performances in 1 year on screen, and then she was probably doing stage as well, although less so in the 70s, but she did the odd bit and piece here.
And also, this year would have been her 90th year.
90 years, yeah. May the 9th, 1930 she was born, so she would be 90 this year, yeah.
So when did she pass? What was
2001, so she was 71. Which was far too young, really, but it was the year after the book came out, so the book, her autobiography, High Spirits, which was a show she was in the 1950s. So she went out with a bang, but I mean, she was never particularly well the last few years, though. She had some health issues and things, but she was always in demand for work, and she did like doing radio, because you didn't have to learn the lines and didn't have to put any makeup on or anything. She just bowl up and do the lines, and she liked doing voiceovers and that sort of thing. But and Teddy, she was looked after. She did a thing called The Last of the Blonde Bombshells, which was like a sort of reunion of this 1940s all-girl band. And Judi Dench is in it, and it's lovely. Ian Holm, and so that was her last film. I think was shown just before she died, 2001. So she was working to the end, So she was always busy, and
So I believe you have a little something from your vault.
For my vault, well, I thought
to show our viewers.
Yeah. Before we started doing this, because we're going to do this as a regular thing. Robert Ross's comedy greats, Robert and Gemma's comedy greats. But I thought I'd dig out. I've got loads of stuff of Joan in the collection, but I thought I'd dig out something that she was really quite proud of. And this is, as I say, theatre programmes. I think I've got a complete collection of all her theatre work. This was a thing called The Lord Chamberlain Regrets, and she gets the front cover, which she was quite proud about. 1961, a review. So the Shaftesbury Avenue, the Savile Theatre in Shaftesbury Avenue, and she toured this as well. So she did the pre-West End tour. 1961, with Millicent Martin and Ronnie Stevens, and she loved doing this. And I mean, you know, about the Lord Chamberlain, what the significance of that is. Lord Chamberlain share. Well, you probably know this if you're theatre buffs even. Lord Chamberlain. Up until 1968, every theatre production had to go to the Lord Chamberlain to be vetted for obscenity and innuendo and everything else. And the letter would start, "The Lord Chamberlain regrets, you've got to cut this out and that out." So basically that title suggests there's a lot of smut in this. The Lord Chamberlain regrets is any theatre go in 1961 would appreciate that this is going to be a sort of saucy, baldy review. And Joan, I love all the adverts in here. You can't see these, but the Schweppes and Martini and stuff, that's advertising for you folks. North Thames Gas there, but Joni's
who is in this then?
I was saying Millicent Martin and Ronnie Stevens, who's the drunk in Carry On Cruising.
Yes. Just
after doing this show actually, Ronnie's here, and this is just it's all the stuff there. But this is the treat. This is the treasure from the vaults. There's Ronnie. Look with his silly noddy hat on. And I love Joni's little biog here because it talks about some of her theatre work. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and since then, Joan has appeared in numerous films, plays and reviews, including the film series Carry On, Doctor in Love and Upstairs and Downstairs, currently appearing in the radio show Something to Shout About. She's doing radio even in 61.
That's a lovely picture.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Go on, Daniel. Yeah.
There we go.
That's from the show.
You can see that.
Yeah, lovely. And then coming soon, Sammy Davis Jr. Come on, I've got to fix that TARDIS of mine, and we'll nip back and see that. But,
so was that something that she gave you in?
No, I had that, and I actually got her one. Because somebody's got these. Whoever looked after Joan's estate, I gave her about 10 or 15 theatre programmes over the 3 years I knew her, and so yeah, just to because it's. I mean, she's in a thing called Breath of Spring. There's a Terry Thomas film called Make Mine Mink. And it's the stage version of that. That became the film came after the stage version. Her part was the Billy Whitelaw part in the film. So Joan lost the film version, but she did the. I got that, and she was really quite emotional about it because this is memories from what was this? This is 1999, 2000. This is from 40 years earlier. So a lot of things had happened in the 40 years.
And so you said she did some radio work.
Yeah, I mean the one she really regretted not happening was it was Fate. Was Round the Horn. Marty Feldman and Barry Took, and of course Kenneth Williams was in Round the Horn. Betty Marsden, who fans will know from two Carry Ons, particularly Terry Scott's wife in Carry On, Karen Pinn with the outrageous laugh. But Betty was leaving the radio show Round the Horn. And Kenneth Williams suggested Joan Sims to come in, and there's Radio Times publicity session was done, photographs with Kenneth. I think Hugh Paddock was there, but certainly Kenneth Williams, Kenneth Horne and Joni for the new series of Round the Horn. And before they started, Kenneth Horne died suddenly, so they cancelled the show off because we can't do Round the Horn without Kenneth Horne. So they did a thing called Stop Messing About. They upped Kenneth Williams to star, and they did a series called Stop Messing About, which was Kenneth and Joan Sims, which was less successful, but I mean she enjoyed doing that. So.
And do they still survive? Are we able
you
to
can
get
those? Yeah,
those?
that would be on whatever BBC iPlayer or whatever BBC 7 that used to be, whatever it is now. But yeah, they pop up occasionally. Yeah, they're in the vaults. Yeah.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Not for the first time today.
Not for the first time.
Go on.
And say to you, what would your recommend to watch of Joan Sims be?
Oh gosh. Well, we mentioned Lady Killers, haven't we? I think if you want something to show how good she was at not just the frivolous comedy stuff, but how good she was as an actor, I think that Lady Killers is called Suffer Little Children. That's the episode that she's brilliant in. So that's a definite recommendation. Comedy. I mean, something. Bells and Centurions. I mean, we were talking about this the other day because we're watching the Centurions films too. We're watching all these comedies. Our eyes are turning square. But there's no resolution for her, is there? She just like vanishes. All the teachers just vanish.
Yeah.
It's almost like they've forgotten to
They
write them in.
They get fired, don't they? Or
they all go, and it's like, where are they?
But they weren't getting paid.
They weren't getting paid,
That
so they all do a bunk, I think. But she's great in that. There's a film a couple of years after that she made called The Naked Truth, which is a Mario Zampi. We watched Too Many Crooks recently, who also directed that. So The Naked Truth is Terry Thomas, Peter Sellers, Peggy Mount, Joan plays Peggy's daughter, and Shirley Eaton are being blackmailed by Dennis Price. See, I've seen it a million times, and that premise, if I had not seen that film, that premise would say, I want to see that film. And she loved working with Terry Thomas. TT really spotted her. In fact, he was one of the early ones who actually said, he was doing some TV with her in the early 50s, said this girl's going to go far in comedy. And he was quite a good sort of talent scout, Terry Thomas. So there's this lovely scene where basically she thinks, this is a spoiler here, but she thinks Terry Thomas is the blackmailer. He's not the blackmailer. Dennis Price is the blackmailer. You find out that straight away, so that's not a spoiler. But there's this whole scene where she's trying to sort of slip a Mickey Finn into his drink to try and knock him out, and it's brilliantly directed, and it's so farcical and fun. And she's a real sort of quivery little nervous wreck of a character. So I think if you want to see something you've not seen before, you probably have seen this, but that's not familiar and not on TV all the time. I think The Naked Truth for comedy and her Lady Killers for serious.
Well, I know we have touched a little bit on her weight, but I think it's important to maybe address that a little bit more.
Yeah, okay.
So what was the cause of the fluctuation? How did that make her feel?
I think it was just depression, really. I think as I say, she mentioned she had a few sort of heartbreaks in her life, and comfort eating, I suppose. And I mean, Peter Rogers, again, was a filmmaker, so he had to be quite harsh. There's a film called Nurse on Wheels they made in the early 60s. And Joan Sims was offered the lead part. She was going to play the lead part. And because she put a bit of weight on, they recast, and they brought in Juliet Mills to play the district nurse in Nurse on Wheels, and she's brilliant in it, but that should have been Joan's part. But Peter Rogers said, look, for the same fee, you can pick any other character you want, and she plays the daughter of the vicar in it, and it's a small part, and it's lovely, but it's not the lead part, obviously. But she put a few pounds on, so there was all sorts of issues with her weight, and I mean, and she would. I remember, I think this actually survives in the documentary What's to Carry On when I first met her, and she's talking about making Carry On England, and she said she squeezed into this uniform and there's this big face poking out, you know. I mean, she was only in her mid-40s when she made that, and she was, you know, big and didn't like it. But you know, it was just the way it was. I mean, some roles she did. One of the I remember talking to her about this. She had no memory of doing this, but she's in Doctor Who. She's in a couple of episodes of Doctor Who with Colin Baker, Doctor Number 6. Well, old school Doctor Who, number 6. Now Doctor Number 428, whatever it is. But she's in a thing. It's called Mysterious Planet, but it's the trial of a Time Lord. So the BBC had given the show a rest for 18 months, the famous hiatus. And they brought it back, and Colin Baker is the Doctor. And she's like this sort of Queen Boadicea or Boudica, depending on which side you're on. She's this brilliantly sort of earthy, primitive, sort of huge and towering sort of warrior leader, you know. And she had no memory of doing it whatsoever. It's like she blocked it out. But there was Colin Baker told me the story. They were down on location, and they had this pudding eating contest in the hotel. And he said there's some eaters because Joan could eat, and Tony Selby, who was also in it, could eat. Brilliant actor, Tony Selby. And Colin, with a sort of wistful shake of the head, said, "Rob, I won," because he could eat as well. Colin can eat. So it was fun to do. But I remember I mentioned this to Joan. She go, "Was that in Doctor Who, dear?" I said, "Yeah, definitely." And I remember actually sitting and watching it with her. So I had the old VHS. It's now on Blu-ray. You can get the Blu-ray. But they brought it out. Was it for the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who? So it would have been 1993. They brought it out in like a TARDIS tin, and the whole set.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
she was upstairs somewhere. But she was killing herself laughing at it. You know, what am I doing? You know, but she liked her work. I think, and just one job came along. I think a lot of actors, she enjoyed it while it was happening. But she would then on to the next one, you know, the next script and whatever.
Were her parents proud of her and her career?
There was issues with, I think with mother was issues about going into show business, but yeah, I think so. I think she was quite problematic, her mum, about boyfriends and things, and I think she was quite restricted about that. So yeah, she had there's an actor called Anthony Baird, who was a long-term boyfriend, who's older than her. He's one of the henchmen in Carry On Spying, a film that Joan isn't actually in, but he's one of. But the best thing that Anthony Baird ever did in terms of preserved stuff you can watch is Dead of Night, Ealing Studios ghost story anthology, and he's the motor car driver who has a crash or has a premonition about this. I won't spoil it because I want to show you this one. But he's really good in this like sort of haunted nightmare situation. So he dated Joan for quite a while, which caused problems with the family and stuff, particularly the mother. So there's all that going on as well. So I think that's why she loved working at Pinewood Studios. It's a cliche now to call it like a family, but it was a family. You know, 3 times a year for Joan. She was doing the Doctors as well. Sometimes 4 films a year at Pinewood. So she'd know the crew, and she'd know all the people in the canteen and the restaurant and the bar, and she'd know everybody, you know. So it's like going home really to Pinewood. So that was a surrogate sort of family.
Well, I think that brings us.
No, not the end. This is the end of part 1.
Part 1. Yeah.
No, okay. Do you want to wrap up there? Yes. Okay.
I think so.
All right.
I'm out of questions.
Well, in that case, we should wrap up and say, so I hope you've enjoyed this. And I should say we're doing this obviously with gorgeous equipment that those wonderful people have funded the GoFundMe account. So if you have enjoyed this, please tell your friends. It's quite inexpensive to pay to view this. And this is basically Gemma and myself have never done shows. If you're familiar from the book club, we started doing these little chats, and we thought we'd do a longer version of Robert Ross's comedy greats. Obviously, I do, when the theatres get back into full operation, I will be back on the road. Every single show is different. If you see me do my Carry On One Man show or my Forgotten Heroes of Comedy, I promise you, I go on stage with a basic idea in my head of where I'm going to go with it, like I do with these. So I enjoy these so much. I enjoy talking about comedy so much. So I never plan them or rehearse them or learn them or anything. I just have a chat.
With the flow.
Yeah, a chat. So that was the lovely Joan Sims, 1930 to 2001.
Who is behind us?
God bless you, Joni. And what is this year, Jem?
This year, comedy is the answer.
Absolutely. So we'll see you next time, and it's down to this young lady who we do next.
Okay.
Can't wait. See you then.
Bye bye.